I thought it was just another storm, just another night of keeping my son warm while the wind tried to tear my old workshop apart. But when I opened the door and saw a terrified woman and her little girl standing there, frozen, crying, running from something I couldn't see, I knew one thing instantly. This storm wasn't the real danger. Whatever was chasing them had just reached my doorstep. 5 years. It had been 5 years since Adam's world had shrunk to the size of his 10-year-old son Noah, and the familiar scent of sawdust and sea salt that filled his grandfather's old woodworking shop. 5 years since his wife, Emily, lost her battle with cancer, taking a part of Adam's heart with her that he never thought he'd get back. He was a Navy veteran, a man who understood structure, loss, and the cold mechanics of a world that could turn on you in an instant. Nothing, however, could have prepared him for the profound, echoing silence she left behind, a silence that even the crash of the ocean waves couldn't fill. Now, his life was a carefully constructed routine, a bulwark against chaos. It was measured in the rhythm of school runs in his old pickup truck, the quiet turning of pages during bedtime stories, and the slow, steady work of turning raw, splintered timber into something beautiful, functional, and whole. The same hands that once serviced the complex humming machinery of a warship now found their peace in the unique grain of a piece of oak, crafting furniture that held the quiet, unyielding strength he tried to model for his son. His workshop was his sanctuary. It was a legacy from his grandfather, a man who had taught him that wood, like people, had a story etched into its very fiber. Every piece Adam created felt like a tribute, a handcrafted table for a family's first home, a rocking chair for a new mother, a meticulously restored antique that would live for another 100 years. It was honest work, grounding work. It kept the ghosts at bay. Noah was a good kid, kind and endlessly curious, with his mother's bright, intelligent eyes and a quiet resilience that made Adam's chest ache with a fierce, protective pride. He was a miniature version of the man Adam hoped to be. He still asked about his mom sometimes, especially on nights like this when the world felt overwhelmingly big and frighteningly loud. On those nights, their ritual was sacred, an unspoken pact against the darkness. They would build a roaring fire in the small cast-iron stove, make hot chocolate with a borderline absurd amount of marshmallows, and Adam would tell one of his stories about the sea, tales of faraway ports, of dolphins racing the bow of his ship, of stars so bright they looked like spilled diamonds on black velvet. He never told the other stories, the ones of steel and fire and loss. Tonight, the blizzard had descended with a terrifying, predatory speed. The news anchors had used words like historic and generational, and for once, the media hype felt like a grave understatement. The windows of their small apartment above the workshop didn't just rattle, they bowed inward, groaning under the assault of the wind. The ocean roared just beyond the dunes, a constant, menacing growl that vibrated through the floorboards. Adam had just tucked Noah into bed, the boy's storm-forged fears soothed by the solemn promise of extra marshmallows in the morning and the weight of his father's old Navy blanket. He was watching the fire, lost in thought, when the knock came. It was faint at first, a barely perceptible tap almost swallowed by the gale. He thought he'd imagined it. Then it came again, sharper, more distinct, laced with a desperation that cut through the noise. He pulled open the heavy wooden door to a swirling vortex of blinding snow. For a moment, he could see nothing but a wall of white. Then, 2 figures materialized from the chaos, huddled together on his doorstep like apparitions. A woman, her face pale and streaked with a mixture of snow and tears, clutched a small child wrapped in a designer coat that was clearly no match for this weather. They were soaked through, shivering violently, their breath pluming in the frigid air. Beyond them, a dark shape, a sleek, expensive car, was just a silhouette, skidded off the coastal road and half buried in a rapidly growing snowdrift. "Please," the woman stammered, her teeth chattering so hard she could barely form the word. "Our car, it just stopped. The engine died. We're so cold." Adam's military training and his innate humanity converged into a single, decisive action. There was no hesitation. "Get inside," he said, his voice calm and steady, a rock in her turbulent sea. He guided them into the warmth, the sudden change in temperature making them gasp. He gently took the child from her arms, a little girl who couldn't have been more than 7, her small body trembling uncontrollably, and wrapped her in a thick wool blanket he kept by the door. The woman, who introduced herself as Lauren, sank into a worn armchair by the fire, her body seeming to collapse in on itself with relief. Her daughter, she murmured, was named Harper. He moved with a quiet, practiced efficiency that was both comforting and commanding. He stoked the fire, adding another log until it blazed brightly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. He put a kettle on the stove and started making more hot chocolate, this time using the special dark chocolate shavings he saved for tough nights. He found dry clothes, an old soft sweatshirt of his for Lauren, and some of Noah's outgrown fleece pajamas for Harper, which were a little too big but wonderfully warm. Soon, an unlikely tableau formed by the hearth. The two children, initially shy, were now sitting side by side on the rug. Noah, ever the gentle soul, had retrieved his own secret stash of marshmallows from a tin in his room and was patiently showing Harper the precise technique for toasting them to a perfect golden brown without catching fire. For the first time all night, a small, genuine laugh escaped Harper's lips, a tinkling sound that seemed to physically chase some of the shadows from her mother's haunted eyes. Lauren watched them, a look of profound, bone-deep relief still warring with a deep-seated terror that tightened the corners of her mouth. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "You have no idea. Thank you." She looked around the small, cozy apartment, at the walls lined with books and the shelves filled with Noah's drawings and Adam's woodworking projects. It was a world away from her own. Adam simply nodded, handing her a steaming mug. The warmth seemed to seep into her hands, steadying them. "Anyone would have done the same," he said softly. "No one should be out in this." For a few precious hours, the world outside ceased to exist. The storm raged, a wild beast trying to claw its way in, but inside, there was the simple, profound comfort of warmth, safety, and the quiet murmur of two children sharing secrets over charred marshmallows. Laughter, a sound that had become far too rare in this house, filled the small apartment, weaving itself into the crackle of the fire. Adam watched them, a strange, bittersweet feeling settling in his chest. It felt like a ghost of a life he once had, a memory of family evenings with Emily. He saw the way Lauren looked at her daughter with a fierce, protective love that he understood down to his very bones. But underneath it, he saw something else, a deep, hunted look he recognized from his time in the service, the look of someone who knows the real enemy isn't the storm you can see, but the one you can't. This woman wasn't just stranded, she was running. As the children, exhausted by their ordeal and warmed by the fire, finally drifted off to sleep in a nest of blankets on the rug, the temporary peace began to fray at the edges. The adrenaline that had kept Lauren moving was fading, replaced by a raw, palpable anxiety. She couldn't settle. She paced the small living room like a caged animal, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her eyes flicking toward the snow-swept windows every few seconds. She wasn't looking at the storm. She was looking through it, as if expecting to see something far more sinister emerge from the blinding white. Adam watched her, his instincts, honed in war zones, where a flicker of movement could mean life or death, on high alert. He stayed quiet, stoking the fire, creating an atmosphere of calm. He knew a person that scared needed to tell their story at their own pace. Pushing would only make them retreat. Finally, she stopped in the middle of the room and turned to face him, her expression a mixture of desperation and resolve. "I haven't been honest with you," she began, her voice barely a whisper, strained and raw. "We didn't just skid off the road. I wasn't just driving aimlessly. I was being followed. For miles, I saw these headlights behind me, keeping pace no matter how I varied my speed. They were professional. When the snow got too thick to see, I panicked. I thought I could lose them on these back roads. I swerved. I lost control." Adam's posture straightened almost imperceptibly. His focus sharpened. He stayed silent, his quiet attention a vessel for her to pour her story into. My full name is Lauren Brooks," she said, and the name landed in the quiet room with a tangible weight. Adam felt a jolt of recognition, a connection so unlikely it was almost absurd. Brooks. He worked part-time from home, a side hustle doing custom furniture repair and fabrication to supplement his craftsman's income. His biggest and most lucrative client, A long-term contract he'd landed through an online portal for high-end corporate work was a massive corporation called Brooks International. The powerful, enigmatic CEO of that corporation was Lauren Brooks. He'd seen her face in business magazines and online articles, a portrait of sleek, unshakable confidence, a world-class leader who looked nothing like the terrified, broken person standing before him in his worn-out sweatshirt. She saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes and gave a short, humorless laugh that sounded more like a sob. "Yeah, that's me. The woman who can command a boardroom of sharks but can't protect her own child. Or that was me. Right now, I'm just a mother." She took a deep, shuddering breath, and the carefully constructed dam she'd built around her story finally broke. The words came spilling out in a torrent, a narrative of wealth, power, and insidious cruelty. Her ex-husband, Richard Hale, wasn't just a bad memory from a failed marriage. He was a clear and present danger, a monster cloaked in charm and expensive suits. He came from old money, the kind of wealth that buys silence and influence, with political connections so deep and tangled they were practically invisible. To the world, he was Richard Hale, the philanthropist, the charismatic visionary. Behind closed doors, he was a master of psychological warfare, a man whose love was indistinguishable from possession. "When I finally found the courage to leave him," Lauren explained, her voice trembling with a rage colder than the wind outside, "he smiled. He told me he admired my spirit, and then he promised he would methodically destroy me. He said he would peel away every layer of my life until all that was left was him." And he had started to make good on that promise. He used his vast financial resources to freeze her personal assets, burying her in legal motions and claiming she was emotionally unstable and an unfit mother. He launched a sophisticated smear campaign, feeding carefully crafted lies to tabloids and whispering poison into the ears of their powerful friends. "But I could fight that," she said, her fists clenching. "I fought him in boardrooms. I fought him in court. The one thing I couldn't fight, the one thing I couldn't protect, was his obsession with owning everything, including our daughter." The final horrifying straw had come that very afternoon. Lauren was getting Harper ready to leave the city for a few days, a quiet trip to a friend's cabin she'd hoped would go unnoticed. As she packed Harper's overnight bag, she felt a hard, unnatural lump deep inside her daughter's favorite teddy bear. A gift from Richard, of course. A sickening chill went down her spine. With trembling hands, she found a pair of scissors and tore open the bear's plush seam. And there it was, a tiny black disc, a GPS tracker, its single green light blinking with a steady, malevolent pulse. He wasn't just watching her through his network of spies and lawyers. He was tracking her in real time. "He wants to take her," Lauren whispered, the words catching in her throat as tears finally broke free, tracing paths down her pale cheeks. "He sent me a message this morning. One sentence. The games are over. He knows I filed for sole custody with evidence of his abuse. He's not going to wait for a judge. He's coming to retrieve his property. He's coming for her." As if her words had summoned the devil himself, a new sound cut through the howl of the storm, a low, mechanical rumble that was distinctly not the wind. It was the sound of multiple engines, powerful and disciplined. Adam moved swiftly to the window, his movements economical and precise. He peered through a small gap in the curtains, his jaw tightening. His heart went cold. 3 large black SUVs, the kind favored by government agencies and private security firms, were pulling up, their tires crunching on the snow-covered gravel. They didn't park. They took up positions, forming a strategic semicircle around his property. Their high-beam headlights cut through the blizzard, lighting up the workshop and the apartment in an eerie, predatory glow. They were here. Adam turned from the window, his face a mask of preternatural calm, but his eyes were as hard as steel. The grieving woodworker was gone. In his place was the Navy veteran, the man trained to assess threats, to protect, to survive. "He sent mercenaries," Adam said, his voice flat and devoid of surprise. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. Lauren stumbled to the window and looked out, a choked gasp escaping her lips. "Oh my God," she breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. "He actually did it." "Listen to me," Adam said, his tone instantly commanding but also deeply reassuring. He took her by the shoulders, forcing her to meet his gaze. "We don't have much time. They'll try to surround the house. This place is a trap. We need to get you and the children out of here now." He moved with purpose, his mind already mapping out a plan, his familiarity with the old building a weapon, the workshop. His grandfather, a man with a healthy distrust for authority, had built it during Prohibition. It had secrets. "There's a back way out," he explained quickly, his voice low and urgent. "An old smuggler's loading dock from the 20s, hidden behind a false wall in the main workshop. It leads out to the dunes, away from the road. I have a friend, a fisherman named Sal, with a remote cabin 5 miles up the coast. It's off the grid. You'll take my truck. The keys are on the hook by the door. Take the kids, get to the main coastal highway, and don't stop for anything or anyone." Lauren stared at him, her eyes wide with a new kind of fear, this time for him. "What about you? You can't stay here. They're armed. They will kill you." "Someone has to slow them down," Adam said, his gaze unwavering. "Someone has to make sure they follow me, not you. I know this place, every nail, every floorboard, every shadow. This is my ground." He moved to the rug and gently woke the children. "Hey, sleepyheads," he whispered, his voice miraculously light. "We're going on a secret adventure, a night mission. We have to be very, very quiet, like spies." Noah, who idolized his father, sat up and nodded seriously, his eyes wide with a mixture of sleep and excitement. Harper, sensing the terror radiating from her mother, clung to her, her face filled with a fear that broke Adam's heart. Adam led them down the creaking stairs into the cold, cavernous workshop. The scent of sawdust and varnish filled the air. He pushed aside a heavy, dust-covered workbench, revealing a section of the rough-hewn plank wall that looked no different from the rest. He located a specific knot in the wood, pressed it firmly, and a hidden door swung inward with a soft groan, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel smelling of damp earth and salt. "Go!" Adam urged, handing Lauren a heavy-duty flashlight from his tool belt. "Follow it to the end. Don't look back. I'll be right behind you." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Her eyes locked with his for a second, a silent, desperate exchange of gratitude and fear. As they disappeared into the darkness, Adam turned back. He could hear the crunch of tactical boots in the snow, the solid thud as men took up positions outside. He took a deep, steadying breath, the familiar surge of adrenaline sharpening his senses, slowing down time. The front door of the workshop didn't just open, it splintered, kicked in with brutal force. 3 large men in black tactical gear swept into the room, weapons raised, their movements fluid and professional. But they were in Adam's world now. From the high rafters, a heavy stack of lumber held by a single pre-cut rope swung down like a pendulum, scattering them with a deafening crash. Hidden in the deep shadows of his largest machines, Adam used their momentary confusion to slip deeper into the maze of lathes, planers, and saws. He didn't have a weapon, but he had his mind and his environment. He was a ghost in the darkness, a phantom in his own home, always one step ahead. He created diversions, toppling shelves of tools and sending carts rolling into their paths, turning their numbers and aggression against them, leading them on a chase deeper into the workshop, away from the tunnel. Then a new figure stepped calmly through the broken doorway. He wasn't dressed for combat. He wore an expensive cashmere coat over a tailored suit, seemingly impervious to the cold. It was Richard Hale. "You can stop hiding, Mr. Walker," Richard called out, his voice smooth, cultured, and dripping with condescension. It echoed unnervingly in the large space. "This has nothing to do with you. I just want my family. A man like you can understand the bonds of family, can't you? Give them to me, and I'll even pay for the damages to your charmingly rustic hovel." Adam remained silent, hidden behind a massive, century-old lathe, his body poised and ready. Richard's manufactured patience wore thin. A cruel, reptilian smirk played on his lips. "I took the liberty of reading your file, you know. It's amazing what money can buy. Adam Walker, widowed veteran, deceased wife, Emily. Such a tragedy. It must be so lonely, raising a boy all on your own. All this for a woman you just met? Trust me, she's not worth what little you have left to lose." The mention of Emily's name was a calculated, vicious strike, a poison dart meant to shatter his composure. But Richard had made a fatal, arrogant miscalculation. He thought it was a weakness to be exploited. He didn't understand that Adam had already lost the love of his life. He had already survived the unsurvivable. He wouldn't stand by and watch another family be torn apart by a predator like this. He stood up slowly from behind the lathe, stepping deliberately into the dim, dusty light, his hands empty and open at his sides. He just stared at Richard, his quiet, unbroken defiance more powerful than any weapon or threat. He was buying time. Every second he kept them here was another second Lauren and the children were getting away. "Where are they?" Richard demanded, his voice losing its smooth veneer, replaced by a raw, guttural anger. Adam didn't answer. Just as Richard raised his hand to signal his men to advance, the night was shattered by a new, alien sound. A sound that cut right through the blizzard's deafening roar. The piercing, unmistakable wail of sirens, growing closer and closer with every heartbeat. The flashing red and blue lights painted the swirling snow in chaotic, strobing colors, turning the serene white landscape into a scene of jarring urgency. Panic, a foreign emotion for these men, replaced their cold professionalism. Richard Hale spun around, his carefully composed face contorting into a mask of disbelief and pure fury. How? How was this possible? They were miles from anywhere, in the dead of night, in the middle of a historic blizzard that had shut down the entire region. Childhood friends in small towns run deeper than any political connection money can buy. The county sheriff, a man named Ben Carter, had grown up with Adam. They had built forts in these woods, fished in these waters, and buried Adam's parents together. When Adam sent Lauren on her way into the storm, his last, most critical instruction was to call Ben the second she had a signal. He had given her a simple code word: Emily. It was a name, a memory, and a distress call all in one. A call for help Ben would know was not a drill, not a mistake, but a matter of life and death. Deputies in heavy-duty winter gear swarmed the property, their presence solid and uncompromising. The mercenaries, trained for combat but not for arrest by local law enforcement, dropped their weapons without a fight. Richard Hale, for perhaps the first time in his gilded life, was utterly and completely not in control. He sputtered and threatened, dropping names of senators and judges, promising lawsuits that would ruin them all. But the sheriff, a man who had seen real trouble before, just looked at him with cold, quiet disdain. "You're a long way from the city, Mr. Hale," Ben said calmly, his voice carrying easily over the wind as his deputies cuffed Richard's wrists behind his back. "Out here, your money doesn't mean much, and we take care of our own." The evidence against him was swift and irrefutable. Adam's simple, unassuming workshop security cameras, installed after a minor break-in years ago, had captured everything: the forced entry, the armed men, Richard's own incriminating words echoing in the workshop. The final, unassailable nail in his legal coffin was the teddy bear. Lauren had given it to the deputies. The discovery of the GPS tracker was a federal offense, indisputable proof of interstate stalking. Richard Hale's world of power, built on intimidation and influence, collapsed like a house of cards. In court, faced with overwhelming digital and testimonial evidence, he lost all parental rights to Harper. His public persona was shattered, and he was sentenced to a long prison term for kidnapping, conspiracy, and stalking. As the legal storm passed, spring arrived on the coast, tentative at first, then bursting forth in a riot of green. The brutal snows melted away, revealing the resilient earth beneath. Lauren, finally, truly free, decided not to return to the steel and glass canyons of the city. The life she had built there felt like a costume from a play she no longer wished to be a part of. She rented a small, sun-drenched house just down the coast from Adam's workshop and, in a move that shocked the business world, transitioned her company to a remote-first model, running the global enterprise from a quiet local office with a view of the sea. More importantly, she began to heal. The hunted, haunted look in her eyes was gradually replaced by a quiet, solid confidence. She started to laugh again, a full, genuine sound that reached her eyes. Harper and Noah had become an inseparable duo. Their days were a whirlwind of adventures on the beach, building elaborate sandcastles and searching for treasure in the tide pools. They spent hours helping Adam in the workshop, their small hands earnestly sanding scraps of wood and their heads bent together in serious conversation. The two quiet children, each carrying their own private, invisible grief, had found in each other a friend who understood without needing to ask. Their shared laughter became the new, constant soundtrack of Adam's home, filling the spaces where silence had once resided. Between Adam and Lauren, things moved with the slow, deliberate pace of two survivors learning to trust the world again. There were no grand, romantic gestures, no dramatic declarations. Instead, their connection was built in the small, quiet moments. They took long walks on the beach as the sun set, sharing stories of Emily, of her bright laugh and love for the ocean, and of the chilling, suffocating fear that had defined Lauren's marriage. They found a deep, unspoken comfort in each other's presence, an understanding that didn't need words. It wasn't a romance born from the fire of drama, but something quieter, stronger, and more profound, built on the unshakable foundation of trust, that this person had seen you at your absolute worst and had not turned away, but had stood by you. One warm, clear afternoon, they all walked to the old harbor to watch the seals sunning themselves on the rocks. Noah and Harper were a few feet ahead, their heads together, pointing excitedly at a mother seal and her pup who were playing in the shallows. Adam stood beside Lauren, their shoulders barely touching, a comfortable silence stretching between them. He looked at her, at the way the afternoon sun lit up her hair and the genuine smile that now rested so easily on her lips. He realized, with a sense of quiet wonder, that the hollow, aching space in his heart, the one that had been there since Emily died, was no longer empty. It hadn't been erased or replaced, but it had been filled. It was filled with the sound of children's laughter, the steady, rhythmic crash of the waves, the scent of sawdust, and the quiet, unwavering presence of the woman standing beside him. He learned that new love doesn't erase old love. It doesn't diminish it or replace it. It just makes your heart bigger, creating new rooms for new people. He had opened his door to a stranger in a storm, offering a simple act of kindness with no thought of reward. He never could have imagined that in doing so, he was also opening the door to a new life, a new beginning, and a new, unexpected family. They were 4 people, brought together by a violent tempest, who had found in each other the safe harbor they had all been searching for. The story of Adam and Lauren is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest, most terrifying storms of life, a simple act of kindness can be the light that guides us to safety. It shows us that true strength isn't found in power, money, or influence, but in the quiet courage to protect others and the willingness to open your door to someone in need. Family isn't always the one we're born into. Sometimes it's the one we build in the aftermath of a storm, pieced together with trust, compassion, and shared hope. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need a little inspiration today. Don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming and powerful stories. We would love to hear from you in the comments below. What does the word family mean to you? Thank you for watching.